applause for Kim.
Sorry if I have food in my teeth. Side effect of eating. So, I was asked to come here today and talk to you guys a little bit about what Kid Center does. I know a lot of you guys work with kids in different capacities, or at least support the community in many different ways, and kids are our future. And so, what I'm going to do today for you guys is explain what Kid Center does, what our services look like. I'm going to grab my phone so I can stay on track unless somebody's ready to wave me down. That's you, great, because I can talk all day, and I will. So I'll tell you about what Kid Center does. I'm going to tell you about my programs in particular, and what, how you guys can kind of interact with that and other opportunities that Kid Center offers to the community. And so Kid Center is located in Bend. We are Tri-County, so we serve all of Deschutes County, Jefferson, and Crook County as well. We also offer services to Warm Springs. We are a regional service provider, which is very unique for child advocacy centers like Kid Center. There's other ones all over the state. We also provide regional services for 8 other counties in the area, helping teach them how to do what they do. So I feel really blessed and lucky that we have such a robust advocacy center right here in our little Central Oregon. We see kids who have been affected by child abuse from age 0 all the way to 18, and we'll even see adults who have developmental disabilities that bring them under the functioning age of 18. So our whole purpose is to, or why we were created, I guess, over 22 years now ago, was to provide a service for those children who have been affected by abuse. We saw that kids could be abused or have affected by abuse, and what used to happen is that kids would come into, let's say, a school, because that's where they're at most of their day, and they're holding a secret, and it's affecting their day-to-day lives, and often they would finally say, this is enough, I don't want this to happen anymore, and they disclose to a trusted teacher, and that teacher would then have to go and tell the principal, and the principal would talk to the kid again, and then that principal has to do their job and report that abuse, so they'd call law enforcement, and a guy with big old guns would come in and ask the kid what's happened to them, and this child's having to tell their story over and over and over again. And our local community said, this is not okay. We want children to feel supported, feel heard, only have to tell their story one time. And so what we did was, we as our community built Kid Center. We decided to reach out and say, how do we build a center to support our kids, to get them the help and services they need, and we were born out of that. And so essentially what we do is we do child abuse assessments. And so DHS or law enforcement or other licensed therapists or doctors can reach out to Kid Center and say, hey, I have a kiddo who's either disclosed, or I suspect something's happened, or we've gotten a report saying something's happening. Can you see this kiddo? And what we'll do is we'll provide a medical evaluation, so it's a full head-to-toe checkup, regardless of what type of abuse they've come in for. So let's say they've come in for physical abuse. We're going to check for all forms of abuse and ask that child about all those safety questions to find out if maybe somebody's verbally abusing them, or maybe they live in a home that's not safe, so there's neglect issues there. We're going to find out what's happened to that child in their own words, in a child-friendly, age-appropriate manner, what's happened to them. So that piece is our forensic interviews. So those happen not simultaneously, but one right after the other. And we are really trying to build a case for that kiddo. So if it needs to go to court, that we have a really solid case of what's happened to that child by professionals who do this for a living. Because often what happens is we ask children the wrong questions, or we don't ask necessarily all the right questions, and it can get thrown out in court, and we don't want that to happen. So we want them to be forensically sound and solid interviews. So aside from the interview portion, other services that we have that support children is our family support team. We have a lot of F services that we offer. Our family support team will meet with the family when they come to Kid Center. Each evaluation is about 4 hours, so they're at our center for about 4 hours through this whole process. And so they get assigned a family support specialist who walks them through that experience so they're not afraid of what's going to happen. And then they follow up with that family for about a year after they've come through Kids Center. And their whole purpose is to lower those risk factors for that family, not just the child, but for that family. Because we know child abuse disrupts lives. It's a hard thing to talk about, let alone have it happen to your own family. And so we're connecting them with services in the community and really trying to make sure that they have everything they need to be successful, to make sure that child's supported in what they do in the community. And so that can be up to a year. If a family's 2 weeks later says, no, we're actually really good, we got the kid the help they need, we're good, then they may drop off a caseload. But for about up to a year, we connect with that family. Other services that we offer, we have therapy on site. So not only are we an assessment or an intervention, so we do those interviews with the kids, but we're also trying to get them towards healing. And we know that if we can get children into therapy quickly, that the success rate for those kiddos moving on and moving past this abuse is really, really high. And so we have on-site therapists who will work with the kiddos. If we have a kid who comes to the center and doesn't want to talk or tell us their story, we might have them meet with therapy first, so you can build a relationship with someone and start, just building a relationship and not even talking about abuse, but just creating some sort of stable relationship for that child so that maybe they can feel more comfortable down the road. And then comes me. So my department is prevention. And so one of the things we saw was, okay, we're doing all these abuse assessments and we're getting, the kids who need the help right now, the help they need, but why are the kids still coming into our center? How do we get ahead of this? And so about 12 years ago, Kids Center developed our prevention department. And I've been with Kids Center for the last 5 years in this department. And our whole purpose is to get education out. So what I've seen and noticed over time is that people aren't comfortable talking about abuse. I'm not the coolest person to come into a room, and I don't have a lot of sparklers, and it's a dark topic. And so I need to start dancing more. I think that might help. But one of the things that I do is I get people starting to talk, starting to get comfortable with having this conversation about how do we protect kids in our community. What does that look like? How do I recognize the signs? I work with kids on a regular basis, and how do you know that they need help? Because most kids don't just say, hey, I've been abused, I'm right here. It takes a long time to build those relationships up with kids so they feel comfortable enough to talk to us and let us know what's happening. And so we've developed 3 different trainings that we have and offer into the community. Our first one is Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children. It's a national program, and actually it's all over the world. It's in Iceland and multiple other places over the world, which I think is pretty awesome. And we've been doing that training for the last 11 and a half years. We've just hit our huge milestone in that we've trained 10,000 people in Central Oregon. And I think that's amazing. There's a statistic that says for every adult who takes Darkness to Light, 10 children are better protected. And so you can extrapolate those numbers and imagine how many kids are that much safer and are being protected from something that they don't have to experience by any stretch of the means. And so the Darkness to Light training, which is what you guys had attended, has anybody else attended our Darkness to Light training? Yeah, I like when there's a couple hands up. So I want to fix that, and I want to get all of you in it. I think it's the training that best fits anybody. I don't care if you have kids yourself. You have, there's grandkids, there's neighbors, there's, the groups that you guys are supporting, when you go to those, the plays and the churches, the kids reside and are part of these communities that you are all a part of. And so I want to challenge people to say, even if you don't work on a regular basis with kids, you can still create safe environments for kids to interact in. And so it's a 3-hour training. We really talk about 5 easy steps to protect children. So the first one is learning the facts. So we spend about 20 minutes talking about what does child abuse look like? What does that look like in our community? And we know that 1 in 10 children are sexually abused before their 18th birthday. And this is national statistics. 1 in 10, which is just too many. That number has gone down over the years, But I think it's an underrepresented number because most kids don't disclose their abuse. Most people live with their abuse their whole lives and never disclose it. So those are only the numbers of the people who have disclosed or have gone into an intervention center like Kids Center to get that support that they need. And so the other piece of that statistic that I really like to highlight is 90% of kids know their abusers. So I know I grew up, and probably many of you guys grew up saying, don't talk to strangers. It's a stranger in the park that's gonna hurt you, don't talk to them, they're bad. And I'm not saying go talk to strangers, because I think there's some merit to that knowledge, but at the same time, there's been a shift, and we've learned things over the years, and we've learned that really what we need to be doing is protecting these groups, our schools, our churches, our after-school programs, our athletic groups, all of these types of groups and more are the places where abusers tend to go to. And so they thrive in these organizations that trust everybody, and what I would call blindly trusting. In that, okay, everybody here is good intentioned, I know I'm good intentioned, so everybody else here must be good intentioned as well. So how do, one of the things I go out in the community to do and say, how do we minimize that opportunity? This is step 2. How do we minimize that risk for kids in our program? How do we interview people? Do we, do we have Kids Center come in and do this training? Do we do background checks? What do we do to make sure that everybody in these programs are as safe as possible? And not only that we let into the programs, but how do we make systems in place that really protect children? So policies, no one-on-ones, this is a big one, and we spend a lot of time in Darkness to Light talking about that, is, okay, so one-on-ones are great for kids to experience. Those one-on-one relationships are very important to children's development, but how do we do them in the safest way possible? Or how do we minimize them altogether? So can we add another kid? Can we have a second adult there, just so that there's a checks and balance system? So we spent a good amount of time talking about that in our Darkness to Light training. And then doing what we're doing today is we're just talking about it. Well, I am at least, so you guys get to listen. So we talk about it. We talk about what abuse looks like. We talk about, have you even thought about doing these things? Or, hey, I'm sending my kid to this program. What are you doing to protect my kid? And all of these questions, we need to start talking about it and having those conversations. The more we create a society where we're willing to talk and have these conversations, much like smoking. Back in the day, it was a very normal thing to smoke, and over time we were like, hey, there's some dangers here. Maybe seatbelts are another example. Hey, maybe seatbelts are useful to staying safe while we're driving down the road in this really fast vehicle. All of these things, we started having conversations and created social change by doing that. And so talking about abuse, getting uncomfortable a little bit, and over time that uncomfortableness will turn into, this is just a conversation that we have. We always are protecting kids. We are always willing to sit and listen to a child if they have a struggle and that they need to say something or communicate to an adult. We're here for them. Fourth step in Darkness to Light is recognizing the signs. So a lot of the signs of abuse look like a lot of other things. They look like kids whose parents are going through divorce. It looks like kids who are just a bad problem child. And a lot of these signs are also signs of kids who have experienced abuse and haven't learned to regulate. And so one of the things we do in this Darkness to Light training is really highlight how and what to look for, how to talk to kids. And that's a big piece of it, is how do you start that open conversation? If you see a kid you suspect something's happening to them, how do you start that conversation? And we spent a good amount of time talking about what that looks like, how you can support them, what to say. If a child tells you something, how do you react in that moment? Because that is hard. Us as adults, our job is to protect kids, and when we hear kids aren't protected, we get angry, we get sad, we get a whole slew of emotions. And so part of what we do at Kids Center is help train adults in the community, not just the teachers who are working with kids, but everybody, on how to react in a responsible way that's supportive, that is not going to encourage the child to withdraw their story. Because often when they have adults respond in a way that's very harsh, or crying or saying, I'm going to hurt so-and-so, I can't believe they hurt you, they're dead to me, whatever, kids still love the people who have abused them often, because there's that trust and that relationship that's built up over time. And so to have that kind of reaction is terrifying to children who've been abused often. because they still don't want that person to get hurt, they just want the abuse to stop. And so the last piece of it, of the training, Darkness to Light, is to react responsibly. And so the biggest thing we encourage adults to do is make the report. I don't care if you think you're 100% right and you just have a suspicion, or you're like, there is something going on and here's the 3 signs I've seen, but I don't have confirmation. That's totally okay. We at Kids Center are the experts. We do this day in and day out, and so we have some knowledge around deciphering whether abuse has happened or not. Same thing with DHS and same thing with law enforcement. Let us do our jobs. Let us figure out if it's happening. We don't have access to the kids and youth like you guys do, working in such a great organization that supports so many different programs out in the world. And so we really encourage people to react with the, upon your suspicions of abuse. Make a call. If you're not comfortable calling DHS or law enforcement, call Kids Center. We'll tell you if it's, if we suspect something's happening and we need to, truly make a report, or you're like, oh, no, that's probably nothing. Like, here's, that child's probably just going through normal developmental stages of things. I get a lot of times parents call and say, hey, my 2-year-old's touching their penis. And I go, that's pretty normal. That's just what kids do. And so we can help you guys decipher whether that is something to be concerned about or not. We do that on a regular basis. We love and are happy to do it. And so, okay, now that I got Darkness to Light out of the way, sometimes I have to breathe, and that helps me get through these. The other trainings that we offer an internet safety presentation, which I think is really useful. If you're not really comfortable with how to protect kids when they're on these devices, or whatever the next it thing is, it could be your shoe. If that's what the next thing is, I want to make sure that kids are protected while using them and have the knowledge about how to protect themselves, how to keep their information safe, how to respond if somebody's acting inappropriately with them online. And so we have a 2-hour training that we offer on a regular basis that really covers all of those knowledge points. I'm going to pass a few of these around. I'm sorry I'm not on camera for a second. Awesome. So what it allows to do is for parents to use what words and terminology that they're most comfortable with, and takes a little bit of that weight off us. We are looking to provide youth programs in the near future. We do offer curriculums for schools to use in their schools, but we haven't and don't have the capacity right now to offer programs for youth. So everything I'm telling you guys is for adults. But then you guys can turn around and have the conversations with the kids. I figure adults are the ones giving the kids the technology, or at least can take it away if the kids are using it inappropriately. So we start with the adults, and hopefully that gets down to the youth. The last presentation I have that we offer is Let's Talk About It. And this training came out of the need for I do Darkness to Light, I do internet safety, and we find that parents and adults in the community were just a little still uncomfortable about how to take that next step with talking with their kids. Because one of the things we do is say, not only talk to adults, but talk to kids. Tell them how to be safe. Teach them their body parts and what's okay to be touched and what's not. What's appropriate types of, love. Hugs are great, and those are awesome, and high fives are great, but if someone asks to touch your private parts, that's not okay. But parents often are really uncomfortable still with having that conversation. So I worked probably like 3.5 years ago to develop our Let's Talk About It training, which really goes and focuses on how do you talk to kids. We practice, we go through scenarios, I give some videos that it's very lighthearted because I think every time I already threw it out there, every time I say penis in a training, everybody goes a little bit. And I mean, this is what I do day in and day out, but part of what I enjoy doing is getting people over that immediate, like, whoa, what did she just say? That's so not appropriate. Even though, I mean, we call this a what? An elbow. So, and that doesn't create the same effect. So I hope one day that we can get to that point where our body parts are our body parts and it doesn't create this little shock effect. Because imagine that if we're willing to talk about that and have that culture where it's okay to have conversations about health and safety and what's okay and not okay without that shame associated with it. And I think that's what keeps a lot of kids from disclosing, is that we live in a society that views bodies as very shameful things, and I think that they're amazing vessels that we live in that should be celebrated and at least communicated with effectively. I can't tell you how many kids come into our center that don't have any knowledge of what the actual proper body part names are, and it makes it really hard for adults to know what kids are talking about. If someone said somebody ate my cookie, I just assume they're talking about a chocolate chip cookie, and I've missed a child's disclosure completely in that process.
Tell them about the policeman.
Yeah, so we, one of the gentlemen in our training talks about how he goes about talking to kids about their bodies. And he's a police officer who goes into classrooms and teaches body safety with kids. And so he goes on in his blue policeman uniform, and he puts on a white pair of shorts and puts a white t-shirt on and folds it over his breast area. And he talks to kids about these are your private areas. They're not to be touched by anyone. And what happens is the kids giggle because they're like, tee hee hee hee, the police officer's being silly. But it makes a fun way for kids to really have a clear example of what body parts are okay and not okay to be touched by other people. And I think that's really important to have those concrete examples with kids for them to really understand. So that whole Let's Talk About It training just takes that conversation to a whole nother level for our own comfort. Because if we're not comfortable about it going into it, the kids are going to sense that. When we have the sex talk, we pull the chair out, and the kids are already like, oh no. Oh no. You know, they sense that we're already feeling uncomfortable, and that, you know, often shuts kids down right off the bat. And so again, I want to make it as easy as it is for everybody going on into those conversations.